And seeing as you are now someone who is helping mold the journeys of other people, what would you say to people who are maybe interested in getting into the world of data and data analytics, or someone who is just new to the field? What sort of tips and things would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's just understand, how do you feel to actually play around with and manipulate data? So some people will tell you Excel is really terrible, but I disagree. I think Excel's a really good tool to just start getting in and just start playing and understanding how data can move and how things can be manipulated. But also, of course, there's certain programming languages or data query languages like SQL or Python or R, where it's looking at manipulation of data, but also computation with data. Also looking at how can you really apply that in a way where you're doing more advanced statistical things with the data too. So just understanding, how does some of that feel for you to actually be hands-on doing the logical problem solving in relation to the data, but also understanding, how do you enjoy asking questions and, more importantly, answering them? Because that's my favorite thing about working in data, is having a question, then leaving the situation with 10 more questions and just going and trying to find some answers to get some sort of wisdom and value out of that. And also being humble enough to know that you're not going to find the answers all the time. And I definitely am not humble all the time. I think I can definitely just find this answer in 10 minutes and an hour later I'm like, hasn't happened the way that I thought it would. But yeah, the key thing really is to get comfortable with asking questions, get comfortable with manipulating information and manipulating data then in particular. You don't have to be a great mathematician to be a data analyst. I don't believe that. And I've seen that it almost annoys me that I did a maths degree, because people will be like, yeah, but you did a maths degree, so you had this as your background. And yes, that is true. But I've seen some really brilliant analysts who have an entirely different background. But the key thing that they have is good problem solving and good intuitive question asking type skills. And that's where you get a really great analyst. So if that sounds like you, then this feels like a really great thing to explore. And I always want to help more people get into data, because obviously, as we've discussed, I love it so much. So if other people can come in with even just a little bit of love for it, I think we can start to really change the narrative of how data works. So yeah, if people want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, then I would be more than happy to have a chat with them too.
Brilliant. And you mentioned having different viewpoints, and some of the best analysts you've come across have different backgrounds which have brought them into data. So how important is that diversity and those different perspectives? How important is that in the world of data and in the world of tech more broadly?
It's so incredibly important, because again, nicely as this is a communication podcast, it all comes down to that communication of how are we solving the problems that we have. And I think having a more diverse set of individuals who can look at those problems that we're trying to solve means that we're coming at it with a lot more empathy. And again, we're talking about tech and data, and I'm talking about empathy, but that's the way that I approach these things. I think that's probably part of the reason why I've come to love it so much, is because that's what I see. Like, we're solving problems in the world. The problems in the world relate to people in some way or another. Even if you're looking at sustainability and like ecological things, that still relates to us, because we live in the world that's being impacted by all those things. So having people with a more diverse set of experiences and lived experiences means then that we can start to bring some of that in the problem solving. And I know for sure that's come up a lot for me, is you can be sat in quite like a homogenous room, like in terms of what you see, in terms of the characteristics of a room, but bringing in an outsider's opinion, even if it's, and I use outsiders, that feels like not the right word, outsider in the set that there's a different set of lived experiences, is really important, because then what we can do is say, we need to make these other considerations. Sometimes that can feel like things are slowed down, but I think ultimately the end result is much more useful, much more productive, much more impactful to just generally to society, which is quite a big statement to make, I appreciate. But I think that's what we need to do when we think about data, is the fact that we can really have like huge world impact when we work in data, because it exists literally everywhere, whether we like it or not.